I am the Batman.
No, Harvey can't. You can't be the Batman. Because I am the Batman. I'm obviously not the Batman. I'm just some random guy trying to teach Greek and to make a point here. And my point is about deponents. Deponents are just verbs that wear a mask, okay? They go around masquerading as if they are middle or passive verbs, but they're not. They're active. And so what we will see with the deponents is that the endings will be over there in the middle passive column, omai, e, atai, amata, esta, antai, or remember, amen, u, ata, amata, esta, anta, those middle passive endings. But even though these verbs wear this mask of middle passive, you know, they wear a mask that says, I'm middle passive, they're not. They're active. So I'll say it again, a deponent verb is really a simple thing. It's just a verb that wears a mask. It looks like it's middle passive, but actually it's active in its voice. An example, a very common verb that we meet many times in the New Testament is erchomai. Erchomai just means I come or I go, which is a little confusing, right? Which is it? Well, usually it means I come. But erchomai indicates motion, and as we will see, Greek attaches all kinds of prepositions to show which direction the motion is going. But erchomai, okay, I come. Notice that this ends in amai, a middle passive ending, and yet it's not translated I am come, as if the coming is happening to me. It's translated actively, I come. Another example is pros euchamai, which means I pray. It doesn't mean I am prayed as if the praying is happening to me somehow, which I guess would make me sort of an idol, which is not a good thing. Pros euchamai means that I am praying. I pray. So look again, amai is the ending, and yet it's active in its translation. I pray. So again, one more time, just because you just can't get enough of the Batman mask, man. A deponent verb is a verb which is middle or passive in form, but active in meaning. It's an imposter. It wears a mask. I am the Batman.
Here is a list of deponent verbs that are used more than 50 times in the New Testament, and just take a look at these. Apokrinomai, notice the ending is middle passive, okay? So amai, so we would expect that to mean I am answered, but that's not what it means. It's deponent. And again, what does that mean? It means that even though this is a middle passive ending indicating that the subject receives the action, it's actually translated active voice. I answer. Okay? And then dunamai, I am able. Ginomai, I am or become. Ex erchamai, I go out. While we're looking at erchamai, this is an important verb because as you can see, there are a lot of variations of this which just append prepositions. So ex means out of, away from, right? So ex erchamai means I go out. Op erchamai is the same thing. Apa, away from. Op erchamai, I depart. Do you remember what ace is? Into, right? So ace erchamai, I go into. Here's our erchamai. Pros erchamai, do you remember pros is like coming up next to, that sort of idea? So I come to. So look at, of these deponents that are used so many times, 5 of them are forms of erchamai. Okay, so no big deal there. And then archamai means I begin. Kathemai, I sit. Pros euchamai, which we looked at, means I pray. Aspadzamai means I greet or salute. And dechamai means I receive. Notice on all of these deponents you have a middle passive ending, and yet the translation is active. That's really all there is to a deponent. Now let's look at a few in context, which is, I think, the best way to learn these things. But okay, here we have an example. Nun de, but now. Pros se, so to you. Erchamai, I am coming. So, but now I am coming to you. Okay, I am coming, that looks like a middle passive. But it's not, it's deponent. So it's, even though it's middle passive in form here, it's actually active in meaning. And notice that when you look up erchomai, there's no such verb as ercho with an omega, because erchomai is deponent. In its present tense stem, it uses a middle passive ending, which is really odd, but that's the definition of a deponent. Here is another example. We read in this little phrase, apakrinitai ha Jesus. Well, what is apakrinitai? Let's look this thing up. Apakrinomai is the lexical form. Notice that it's not apakrino, but apakrinomai. That tells us that this is a deponent, which means, and I'll say it over and over again here, that even though this is a middle passive ending, we translate it actively. How do I know that this is deponent? Because of the way it's listed in the dictionary here. There is no apakrino, it's listed as apakrinomai, which means that it's a deponent. Its middle passive ending here is translated in the active voice. So, this means I answer. This means he, she, or it answers. Remember, we see the etai ending here, third person singular. So, apakrinitai ha Jesus, meaning, this is nominative, right? So Jesus answers. Here's another one, a nice, very short verse. 2 words, in fact. A dialeptos means unceasingly, without interruption. Pros euchesta. Pros euchesta, when we look that up, we come up with pros euchamai. Notice the ending of this. Not omega, but amai. What does that mean? Means it's deponent. Even though this is middle passive, we translate it actively. So this means I pray, pros euchamai. What does pros euch estha mean? Remember our personal endings here, that would be second person plural, right? You all. Unceasingly, you all pray. Now in this case, it happens to be imperative mood, but we won't get hung up on that. The point I want to make here is that this is a deponent. Middle passive form, still translated actively. It's not always be prayed or something like that. Doesn't even make sense. It means pray. You pray, actively pray without ceasing. And here's an example in John 1. Lege autois, so he says to them, erchesta kai obsesta. Come and you will see. Okay, now notice that both of these are deponent. This is not become and you will be seen, but come and you will see. Now both of these are imperative mood too, so we won't get hung up on that. What I want you to see is that even though these are middle passive endings here, they still are translated actively, and I hope you recognize that ending there, esta, second person plural again, so y'all come and y'all will see. Again, it's a middle passive ending, translated actively. That's a deponent.
Now I need to augment on augments just a little bit here, because when a verb goes into past time in Greek, we've seen this, that it will augment the front of the verb. And that's nice and easy if the verb begins with a consonant, like luo. Luo just becomes lu, right? We just put an epsilon on the front and it tells us I've gone into past time. But you might have run into this already. What do we do if a verb starts with a vowel? Let's take agapo, for example. I am loving, agapo. Let's say we want to put it into past time and we want to augment the front. Would we say agapon, I was loving? Agapon? Come on now, we know better than that by now in our Greek, right? Actually is one of our contractions. That would become eta, right? So agapon, I was loving. So notice we have this contraction. Well, actually it's not a contraction, because the rule is that when a verb goes into the past time and it starts with a vowel, the vowel will lengthen to show the augment, rather than doing this barbaric thing of attaching an epsilon with another vowel and don't like that. So we just lengthen the vowel. Okay, Now there's a second pattern of augmentation that we need to look at as well, and it has to do with what are called compound verbs. Compound verbs are Greek verbs that are made up of a preposition and a verb, okay? And they're very common. And in fact, we just saw one. It happens to also be deponent pros euchomai, means I pray. But you might have noticed pros is a preposition. Okay, let's say we want to put this in past time, so we know our ending will go to a secondary. Amai will become amen. But how do we augment the front of this verb? Well, it would kind of make sense that we would just put an epsilon on the front. So it would be epros you
Amen.
epros you.
Amen.
That would make sense to me, but that's not what happened. Because the preposition really is not a part of the verbal. So we don't augment the preposition. The augment will come between the preposition and the verbal. So it's kind of jammed in there. So let's put the epsilon in between. Pros euchomai. Euchomein. Let's get the ending right. Pros euchomein. Well, come on, we don't do that, right? So that lengthens, as we've seen, to an eta. So it would become pros euch.
Amen.
Pros euch.
Amen.
Actually pronounced the same, but as you read that, you would see that augment there as a lengthened vowel between the preposition and the verbal idea. Let's look at a few of them in context.
Here are 3 verbs that start with alpha, and notice that when they lengthen, the alphas become etas. So here we have actually a diphthong becoming an eta, but we're looking for some kind of funny business, okay, in the front of these verbs that start with vowels. Now these are interesting actually because they all have some sort of interest. This actually is an alpha contract verb, right? And notice that the contract vowel lengthens prior to the personal ending. Agapesa, that will happen every time. This is a second aorist. You can see how the stem changed here, and so it doesn't use the sigma alpha. Okay, and this is a liquid aorist. Well, you'll notice that there's no sigma here. Why? Because lambda mu nu rho, because the sigma got dropped here. But that's not what we're looking at. Okay, what I want you to see most of all is how these verbs augment, and they augment by lengthening the vowel. Or here, erotao becomes erotesa. Notice the epsilon lengthens into an eta. Also notice though that this is another one of the contract verbs here, and it has the alpha which lengthens before the ending again. Same pattern there. Okay, but how do you augment a verb that starts with a vowel? You lengthen the vowel. Here are a couple of verbs that begin with prepositions. So we have proskuneo. Do you see the preposition jumping out at you there? Or soon ago. There you have soon as like the preposition. So the augment does not come prior to the preposition here, nor here. Where does the augment come? You have pros kunesa. So the augment comes between the preposition here and the verb. Okay, so this is pros ekunesa. Or here we have soon ago. So how will we do this? We have soon, and then this is notice it's a second aorist because the ago becomes, we add a gamma here, don't we? So, but notice that because it's a vowel, that it lengthens. Soon egagon. So the augment comes in the middle here of the verb between the preposition and the verb, not before the preposition. In other words, not here. No. There, soon egagon. All right, so those are our 2 things. We got to get used to this, that vowels, when they augment, they just lengthen. And when you have a verb that begins with a preposition, look for the augment between the preposition and the verb. Now to just show you how some of these pop out in a text here, in verse 20 here we have homologeson. Now actually this is from homologeo is the original word, and so you can see the omicron became an omega here, and this is our aorist third person singular ending. Here's the lengthened connecting vowel before that aorist ending. All of this is behaving beautifully, okay? But notice the augment here. Homo, homa. There we go. Homa lagesen, not hama, but homa. And here, arneomai is to deny. Nesata happens to be a deponent as well, but we won't get into that right at this moment. I just want you to see that the alpha became an eta that goes with this aorist. So there's your augment there. It's not an epsilon, it's the lengthened vowel. Same thing here, erotesan. From erotao, this is another contract vowel, but the epsilon here became an eta. And then right here we have an example, apokrenomai becomes apekrithe. So where is our augment? It's in the morphing of this vowel from an omicron to an epsilon. So learn to look for these augments in sort of sneaky places. One more example from verse 37 here. Akuo means I hear. So akusan, do you see how the alpha in akuo became an eta? And here's our aorist clue, sigma alpha. But back to our main point here of this lesson, deponents. Just remember, deponents are middle or passive in form, but active in meaning. That's what a deponent is. And here is an example, erchomai. And you can see again and again, here we have these middle passive endings with active translations. I come, you come, he, she, it comes. So, amai, eatai, amatha, esta, antai, in this case, not translated passively, but actively. Why? Because erchomai is deponent.
I am the Batman. No, you're not the Batman. You're just a goofy Greek teacher. I am a middle passive. No, you're not. You're a deponent. Remember, deponents are middle or passive in form, but active in meaning. They wear the mask, right? They pretend to be middle passive, but they're not. They're actually active voice in spite of the middle passive endings. That's all there is to the deponents.